If you had a daughter, wouldn't you rather she didn't marry a poor man?
But I was...
You'd want her to have the most wonderful things in the world and to be very happy. I can be smart when it's important, but most men don't like it.
She was the ultimate Hollywood sex symbol, the most famous blonde ever, even captivating an American president. Marilyn Monroe's rise to fame is often called a Cinderella story, and her life continues to inspire countless films. But was she truly happy behind that charming, carefree smile? Her life was marked by 3 divorces, sexual abuse, humiliation by producers, drug addiction, and multiple miscarriages. And that's not all.
He was kind of scary looking, but he wasn't really all bad. I think he just craved a little.
Marilyn Monroe's life was a whirlwind of tragic and mysterious events, filled with ups and downs. Today, we will uncover the real story of this extraordinary woman and what she said in the end. Born Norma Jean Mortensen on June 1, 1926, in Los Angeles, the woman who would become the iconic Marilyn Monroe had a tumultuous start to life. Her mother, Gladys Pearl Baker, worked in the film industry, but her identity as Norma Jean's father remained a mystery for years. While Martin Mortensen, Gladys's second husband, was named on the birth certificate, he wasn't the biological father. It wasn't until a 2022 DNA test conducted for the documentary Marilyn, Her Final Secret that the truth was revealed. Charles Stanley Gifford, a colleague of Gladys, was Norma Jean's real father. Gladys, a young woman with a penchant for partying, wasn't cut out for motherhood. Her first 2 children had been taken by her ex-husband, and she didn't want to repeat the experience with her third. Following her mother's advice, Gladys placed 2-week-old Norma Jean in foster care with a religious couple, Ida and Albert Bolender. The Bolenders were strict and conservative, raising Norma Jean with a firm hand and forbidding any form of entertainment, including movies, which they considered sinful. Despite this restrictive upbringing, Gladys didn't completely abandon her daughter. She faithfully paid for Norma Jean's care and visited her on weekends, maintaining a connection despite the distance. Those few hours a week with her mom were a breath of fresh air for Norma Jean, who only knew the strict and distant Aunt Ida. But Gladys's lifestyle was a far cry from the strict religious upbringing Norma Jean had experienced. It was confusing for the young girl, caught between 2 very different worlds. Norma Jean's only friend during this time was a stray dog named Tippy. The Bolenders allowed her to keep him, and he became her loyal companion. But her happiness was short-lived when a neighbor shot Tippy for barking too much. Norma Jean was devastated, crying for days over the loss of her furry friend. Soon after, Gladys took her daughter to live with her, but it wasn't out of a sudden maternal instinct. Gladys needed a child to qualify for a loan to buy a house near the glamorous Hollywood Bowl. To make ends meet, she even rented out rooms to struggling actors, further exposing Norma Jean to a world far different from her sheltered upbringing. In this new environment, Norma Jean was surrounded by people who idolized the movies, a stark contrast to the Bolenders' condemnation of them. One day, Gladys showed her daughter a picture of a man she claimed was her real father, Charles Stanley Gifford. This photo became a symbol of the fatherly love Norma Jean craved, a longing that would shape her relationships with men throughout her life. Despite living with her mother, Norma Jean was often left to her own devices. She struggled in school and felt neglected as Gladys battled her own demons. The family had a history of mental illness, and Gladys feared she would inherit the same fate. This fear, coupled with the stress of raising a child alone, led to a nervous breakdown in 1934. One day, 8-year-old Norma Jean witnessed the terrifying scene of her mother screaming and kicking before the police arrived. The woman was taken to a mental health clinic where she was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. Without any support, Norma became homeless once again. In her own words, she reflected on the impact her experiences had on her life. The lack of any consistent love and caring. A mistrust and fear of the world was the result. Despite these struggles, she developed a deep empathy for the vulnerable, understanding their needs. When Norma faced being sent to an orphanage, her friend and co-worker Grace stepped in. Grace adored the girl and treated her as if she were her own daughter. She nurtured Norma's dream to become an actress and exposed her to the world of filmmaking. Under Grace's guidance, Norma began to experience the joy and excitement of the entertainment industry. However, not everything was smooth sailing for the young Norma. As Grace's life changed due to marriage and her husband's financial constraints, they faced the possibility of sending Norma back to an orphanage. Though Grace fought against it, Norma experienced another traumatic betrayal by an adult, as well as ridicule from other children. This emotional turmoil, coupled with the early sexual assault she experienced, deeply scarred Norma's psyche. As she grew older and became famous, she referred to the man responsible as Mr. Kimmel, withholding details of the event itself. Despite the challenges, when Norma was 11 years old, Grace managed to regain custody of her. However, this newfound stability was threatened when Grace's husband, Irwin, attempted to forcibly enter Norma's room while they were alone, intending to sexually assault her. When Grace discovered the truth about the attack on Norma, she didn't offer the support Norma had expected. Instead, Grace blamed Norma for provoking her husband, further adding to the traumatizing experience. Norma's stutter worsened as a result of the incident, and she struggled to overcome it for years to come. Despite the turmoil, Norma remained in contact with her mother and would occasionally send money to her new caretaker. Around 1938, Norma found herself in another distressing situation when she was manipulated into an intimate relationship by a relative. As there was no one to turn to for support, she experienced immense pain and isolation. During this time, Norma found solace in the cinema, often spending all her money on movie tickets. She adored the magic of the movies and dreamt of one day being up on the screen, bringing joy to the audience. This ambition propelled her to continue seeking opportunities within the entertainment industry. When Norma discovered she had an older half-sister, Bernice, she was overjoyed, and the sisters began a lifelong correspondence. However, as she turned 15, the societal pressures to escape the orphanage and guardians led her to marry her neighbor, James Dougherty. Their relationship lacked strong romantic feelings, but the marriage provided her with a sense of stability and adventure. In the meantime, Norma Jean was trying to adjust to life as a young wife. But it wasn't exactly her dream come true. The longer she was married to James, the further away her acting dreams seemed. But then, World War II changed everything. James joined the Merchant Marines, and Norma Jean, encouraged by her mother-in-law, got a job at a nearby factory making war supplies. It wasn't exactly glamorous, but it was close to home. Norma Jean's life took an unexpected turn when an army photographer named David Conover visited the factory. He was taking pictures of the women workers for a magazine, and he was instantly drawn to Norma Jean's beauty. He snapped her photo, and when he saw the results, he knew he had found something special. He went back to the factory and convinced her to become a model. Norma Jean was thrilled. Finally, someone had recognized her potential. She quit her factory job and started her modeling career. But it wasn't an overnight success story like Cinderella. It was hard work, and she faced stiff competition from thousands of other aspiring models. Conover took some stunning photos of her, which helped her land a contract with a modeling agency in Los Angeles. She wasn't the most experienced model, but she was determined to succeed. She worked tirelessly, studying poses and expressions, and soon her photos started appearing in magazines all over the country. One photographer, Eve Arnold, who would later become famous for her photos of Marilyn Monroe, said that Norma Jean had a natural talent for the camera. She knew how to work it and get the perfect shot every time. It was during her modeling days that Norma Jean dyed her hair blonde. Her agents thought it would help her get more work, and they were right. She experimented with 12 shades of blonde, before finding her signature look, and soon her pictures were gracing magazines across the country. But modeling wasn't enough for her. Marilyn still longed for the silver screen. In 1946, she got her chance when her agency sent her to audition at 20th Century Fox. And they loved her. The studio offered her a contract with a weekly salary, whether she worked or not. However, before signing on the dotted line, the studio's head of casting, Ben Lyon, wanted to have a chat with Norma Jean. He told her that her name wasn't fit for a movie star. They brainstormed new names until Lyon suggested Marilyn, after an actress he knew who reminded him of her. Norma Jean decided to use her grandmother's last name, Monroe. And just like that, Marilyn Monroe was born. Meanwhile, her marriage to James was falling apart. He wanted a traditional wife and family, but Marilyn had bigger dreams. They divorced in 1946, the same year she signed her studio contract. But even with her foot in the door of Hollywood, Marilyn faced a new challenge: stage fright. The woman who dreamed of being an actress was terrified of the camera. She was constantly afraid of messing up, a fear that would haunt her throughout her career. But Marilyn was determined to succeed. She took acting, dancing, and singing lessons, even practicing horseback riding. She wanted to be more than just a pretty face. She wanted to be a skilled and respected actress. Unfortunately, her contract with Fox was coming to an end, and there were no new offers. It turned out that Daryl Zanuck, the head of the studio, simply didn't like her. He thought she wasn't pretty enough for light-hearted comedies and not talented enough for serious dramas. Marilyn didn't fit his vision for a successful actress. In 1947, Marilyn's contract with Fox ended without renewal, exposing the harsh realities of Hollywood. She was just one of many pretty girls vying for attention in a competitive industry. Feeling disheartened, she briefly returned to modeling, but her heart remained set on acting. Marilyn knew that in order to break back into the movie business, she had to play by the rules of a male-dominated world. She began a series of affairs with influential men in the industry, hoping they would open doors for her. It wasn't a path she necessarily enjoyed, but she was determined to succeed. Later in life, Marilyn would reflect on this time in an article titled "Wolves I Have Known." She condemned the prevalent sexual harassment in Hollywood, foreshadowing the Me Too movement decades later. Marilyn saw herself as a woman fighting to be taken seriously in a world that saw her as a mere object. One influential figure Marilyn connected with was producer Joseph Schenck, a man almost 50 years her senior. She became his mistress, accompanying him to events and even living in his guest house. However, Schenck often shared Marilyn with his wealthy friends, none of whom were interested in helping her career. To them, she was just another pretty face. Despite the setbacks, Marilyn persisted. She studied acting diligently, taking lessons for hours each day. Her determination impressed even veteran photographer Ben Lyon, who recalled Marilyn saying she worked hard so that she'd be ready when opportunity knocked. And it finally did. In 1948, thanks to Schenck's influence, Marilyn signed a 6-month contract with Columbia Pictures. Her appearance was once again transformed, with platinum blonde hair and a more glamorous style. Marilyn also began studying with acting coach Natasha Lytess, who became a mother figure to her. This mentorship provided much-needed guidance and support as Marilyn continued to navigate the challenging waters of Hollywood. Natasha Lytess played a pivotal role in Monroe's development as an actress during the time they worked together on 22 films over 6 years. Initially, Monroe struggled with her technique, but with Lytess' guidance, she honed her skills and overcame her voice and speech issues. Though it's said that Lytess taught Monroe to speak in a whisper, some attribute this trait to her previous stutter. Apart from her work with Lytess, Monroe actively engaged in self-education to form her unique style. She learned body language techniques from a book called The Thinking Body, which involved exercises like imagining a rope coming from her top and tied to a cloud, helping her perfect her walk. One notable example is the long-shot scene in Niagara, where her graceful gait mesmerized the film crew. Simultaneously, Monroe received vocal lessons at Columbia Pictures from Fred Karger. Although she fell in love with him, their relationship did not work out, further deepening her trust issues. Struggling and out of work, Monroe landed a role in Ladies of the Chorus, a low-budget musical which unfortunately failed to boost her career. Facing financial troubles and personal insecurities, Monroe was vulnerable and easily taken advantage of. An encounter with 3 men ended in a near-rape ordeal, leaving her broken, humiliated, and destitute. In 1949, she met photographer Tom Kelly, who offered her a paid photo shoot, which led to a series of nude images that would later have significant cultural impact. It was during this tumultuous period that Monroe began a relationship with Johnny Hyde, the vice president of an acting agency. Their partnership would eventually pave the way for her rise to fame and stardom, as well as her creation of one of the most iconic and recognizable images in American history. Johnny Hyde, smitten with Marilyn, became her biggest champion. He was determined to make her a superstar, even arranging for her to get a nose job and other procedures to enhance her already stunning looks. He also secured her roles in the movies The Asphalt Jungle and All About Eve, both of which were nominated for Oscars. These roles finally put Marilyn on the map, catching the attention of producers and audiences alike. In 1951, Marilyn signed a 7-year contract with 20th Century Fox, earning a decent weekly salary. She landed a series of roles in comedies where her charming personality and undeniable sex appeal won over audiences. The press raved about her, calling her the decoration of the movies. Marilyn's popularity skyrocketed, and she even hosted the 23rd Academy Awards. But just as her star was rising, someone unearthed her old nude photos from a calendar shoot. The studio panicked, thinking this scandal would ruin her career. They ordered Marilyn to deny everything. But Marilyn, always a rebel, had a different plan. In an interview, she bravely owned up to the photos, sharing a story of a struggling actress who was desperate for money. Her honesty and vulnerability resonated with the public, and the scandal, surprisingly, didn't damage her reputation. In fact, it solidified her status as a sex symbol and a trailblazer for women who were comfortable in their own skin. In 1953, those same nude photos appeared in the very first issue of Playboy magazine. The magazine's founder, Hugh Hefner, bought the photos for $500, but Marilyn didn't receive a dime. Hefner later regretted not thanking her personally, as those photos are credited with launching Playboy into a global phenomenon. As Marilyn's star continued to rise, her relationship with Johnny Hyde came to an end. Johnny Hyde offered Marilyn his hand in marriage, but to his surprise, she said no. She didn't mind having fun with the charming producer, but marrying someone she didn't truly love was a step too far. Hyde, insulted by the rejection, warned her that without him, her fame would fade. But Marilyn, always defiant, was determined to prove him wrong. In the meantime, she was on a quest to find her biological father, Charles Stanley Gifford. In 1952, she tracked down his phone number and nervously dialed it. But her hopes were dashed when he coldly dismissed her, telling her to call his lawyer. This rejection left Marilyn heartbroken and feeling abandoned once again. But Marilyn was a fighter. She picked herself up, determined to prove she was more than just a pretty face. She told herself, "First, I'm trying to prove to myself that I'm a person. Then maybe I'll convince myself that I'm an actress." And soon she started landing leading roles in movies like Monkey Business, Don't Bother to Knock, and Clash by Night. Despite her growing fame, studio head Darryl Zanuck still saw her as a dumb blonde and cast her in roles that reflected that stereotype. Marilyn played the sexy, gold-digging airhead, and the audience loved it. But Marilyn was frustrated. She craved more challenging roles that would allow her to showcase her true talent. Marilyn was caught in a paradox. She hated being seen as a sex symbol, yet she played the part perfectly, building the image of Marilyn Monroe so meticulously that she started to believe it herself. She was a complex woman, both vulnerable and strong, and her struggle for recognition as a serious actress continued. Eventually, she started landing more substantial roles, like the femme fatale in Niagara. Although the role was a breakthrough for her career, she still faced inequality. Can you believe she was paid less than the makeup artist on the film? Despite her growing popularity, she was still working under an old contract that paid her a measly salary. But things were looking up. On the set of Niagara, Marilyn learned that she had landed a role in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, a musical comedy that would solidify her status as a Hollywood icon. While working on Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, Marilyn was given her own dressing room, a sign of her growing status in Hollywood. But with fame came pressure, and Marilyn was terrified of messing up in front of her more experienced co-stars. She arrived early and left late, often making everyone wait. Her co-star, Jane Russell, was the only one who could coax her out of her trailer sometimes. Despite their good relationship, there was tension when Marilyn learned that Russell was earning a whopping $200,000 for the film, while she was stuck with a measly $500 a week. The studio wasn't too keen on Marilyn's voice either, even considering dubbing over her lines. Luckily, they changed their minds, and only 2 brief moments in the iconic song, "Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend," were dubbed by another singer. Marilyn's tardiness continued on the set of How to Marry a Millionaire. The director, Jean Negulesco, said she was always a bit hesitant to start filming, taking hours to get ready. But once the camera rolled, her magic shone through. Both films, released in 1953, were huge hits, and Marilyn's stardom soared to new heights. But her personal life was just as dramatic as her on-screen persona. In 1954, she married baseball legend Joe DiMaggio, but their honeymoon phase didn't last long. DiMaggio was conservative and jealous, wanting Marilyn to be a traditional housewife. But Marilyn was a free spirit who craved independence and adventure. Although Marilyn initially tried to appease her husband, even learning to cook, their differences eventually led to conflict. DiMaggio was increasingly annoyed by the scandals surrounding his wife and her status as a sex symbol. Their tension reached a boiling point during the filming of the famous subway grate scene in The 7-Year Itch. In front of hundreds of onlookers and photographers, Marilyn's white dress flew up in the air, causing a frenzy. When DiMaggio arrived on set and witnessed the scene, he was furious. This iconic moment became a symbol of the clash between Marilyn's glamorous career and her husband's traditional values. It was a turning point in their relationship, leading to their divorce just 9 months later. After the subway grate incident and the following divorce, Marilyn's relationship with 20th Century Fox soured. She was tired of the low pay and lack of control over her roles. In 1954, their disagreements reached a boiling point, and Marilyn was suspended from work. But Marilyn wasn't one to back down. She left Hollywood for New York and started her own production company with photographer Milton Green. It was a bold move that surprised everyone in the industry, who saw her as just a pretty face. But Marilyn was determined to prove them wrong. In January 1955, she embarked on a year-long legal battle with Fox. Behind the scenes, Marilyn was far from the dumb blonde persona she portrayed on screen. She had a personal library of over 400 books, including classics by Tennessee Williams and F. Scott Fitzgerald, as well as philosophical works by Plato and Aristotle. She was a voracious reader, constantly seeking knowledge and trying to make up for her lack of formal education. Marilyn even took evening classes in art and literature at UCLA. She had a unique way of choosing books, picking them at random and buying them if she liked a random paragraph. In a famous photo, she was captured reading James Joyce's complex novel Ulysses, proving she was more than just a pretty face. Her friend, poet Norman Roston, described her as a woman who wore a mask in public, but in private, she was constantly searching for answers in life and in literature. She loved poetry and had an intuitive understanding of complex forms. She even dabbled in art herself, creating sensual sketches that were later sold at auction. Marilyn's hunger for knowledge and artistic expression revealed a deeper side to her, one that often went unnoticed behind the glitz and glamour of Hollywood. She was a woman of many talents, a complex and multifaceted individual who refused to be defined by stereotypes. In 1954, Marilyn's career took a turn when her contract with 20th Century Fox expired, and they chose not to renew it. Feeling the harsh reality of the industry, Marilyn fell into a depression, but she wasn't one to give up easily. She returned to modeling for a short time, all while plotting her way back into the movie business. Marilyn knew what she had to do to get ahead: play the Hollywood game. She started having affairs with influential men in the industry, using her charm and beauty to open doors. It wasn't something she was proud of, but she saw it as a necessary evil. One man who took notice of Marilyn's potential was Lee Strasberg, a renowned acting teacher who had worked with stars like Marlon Brando and James Dean. He saw something special in Marilyn and took her under his wing. Under Strasberg's tutelage, Marilyn's acting skills blossomed, but it wasn't an easy journey. Strasberg's method was intense and emotionally demanding, pushing Marilyn to confront her deepest fears and insecurities. He became a father figure to her, but his harsh criticism often left her feeling even more vulnerable and insecure. One of Strasberg's techniques involved forcing Marilyn to relive traumatic experiences, like the time she was almost suffocated with a pillow. This method, while effective in some ways, also took a heavy toll on her emotional well-being. Elia Kazan, a director and former lover of Marilyn's, later admitted that Strasberg exploited his students' vulnerabilities, especially those who were more naive and insecure. Marilyn, with her troubled past and desperate need for love and approval, became his perfect victim devotee. As Marilyn's career soared under Strasberg's guidance, her former mentor, Natasha Litess, was cast aside. Marilyn even sent Litess a telegram telling her she no longer needed her services. It was a cold and heartless move that left many wondering what had happened between the two women. Meanwhile, 20th Century Fox realized that they had underestimated Marilyn. Her star power was undeniable, and they wanted her back. They finally agreed to her demands for a better contract, offering her a hefty salary and the freedom to choose her own projects and collaborators. Despite the heartache of her previous relationship, Marilyn found a new love in Arthur Miller, a brilliant playwright and Pulitzer Prize winner. He was different from the men she'd been with before, an intellectual who saw her as more than just a sex symbol. They shared a love for literature and even joined the Committee for a Sane Nuclear Policy together. But Marilyn's insecurities resurfaced, and she became overly reliant on Miller's opinions, just like she had been with Strasberg. She felt safe and loved with Miller, but their relationship was under scrutiny due to his alleged communist ties and the FBI's surveillance. Fox even demanded she end the relationship, but Marilyn refused, calling the studio bosses born cowards. Miller, meanwhile, used Marilyn's fame to his advantage, announcing their engagement to the press without even proposing to her first. But despite the rocky start, they married in 1956, a union dubbed Egghead Weds Hourglass by Variety magazine. Marilyn combined her honeymoon in London with filming The Prince and the Showgirl, produced by her own company and directed by Laurence Olivier. She was excited to work with such a respected actor, but the experience turned out to be a disaster. Olivier and Monroe clashed constantly, with Olivier dismissing her ideas and treating her like a mere sex object. Marilyn later revealed that Olivier's condescending attitude upset her deeply. He told her to look sexy, Marilyn, which she found insulting. She retaliated by being late and difficult, creating a tense atmosphere on set. According to Miller, Olivier was jealous of Marilyn's star power and tried to compete with her. It was a clash of egos and artistic visions, and the film suffered as a result. Despite the challenges, Marilyn's star continued to shine brightly. Marilyn's career soared in the 1950s, landing her a new contract with 20th Century Fox and the starring role in Bus Stop. It was her first dramatic role, earning her a Golden Globe nomination and proving she was more than just a pretty face. But with fame came pressure, and Marilyn struggled to balance her public image with her personal demons. Amidst her divorce from DiMaggio, Marilyn fell for Arthur Miller, a brilliant playwright who seemed to see the real her. But even this relationship brought its own challenges. The FBI was watching Miller due to his suspected communist ties, and Fox pressured Marilyn to break up with him. She refused, fiercely defending her love and calling the studio executives born cowards. Their marriage was a whirlwind, with a double ceremony, a Jewish conversion for Marilyn, and even a honeymoon combined with filming The Prince and the Showgirl in London. But tensions rose on set as Marilyn clashed with director Laurence Olivier, who dismissed her ideas and treated her like a mere sex object. Marilyn felt disrespected and unappreciated, a feeling that would haunt her throughout her career. Back home, cracks appeared in her marriage. Marilyn found Miller's notes, where he criticized her and expressed doubts about their relationship. The revelation devastated her, but she still clung to the hope that they could make it work. Meanwhile, Marilyn's mental health deteriorated. She battled insomnia, relying on sleeping pills, and her insecurities deepened. The once vibrant star described herself as lonely and depressed, seeing only sadness and disappointment in her reflection. In 1958, Marilyn started filming Some Like It Hot, a movie that would become a classic. But behind the scenes, it was a nightmare. The constant pressure to be the perfect sex symbol took its toll on Marilyn, and her reliance on pills affected her memory and performance. She often needed dozens of takes to get a single line right, adding to the stress and frustration on set. It was clear that Marilyn's personal struggles were starting to affect her professional life, but she was determined to keep going, driven by her passion for acting and her desire to prove her worth. As Marilyn's star power soared, her relationship with Johnny Hyde reached a breaking point. Hyde, smitten with Marilyn, proposed marriage, but she surprisingly turned him down. She enjoyed his company, but marriage was a step too far. Hyde, insulted by the rejection, warned her that her popularity wouldn't last without his help. But Marilyn was determined to prove him wrong. Meanwhile, Marilyn continued her search for her biological father, Charles Stanley Gifford. In 1952, she found his number and called him, only to be met with a cold and dismissive response. Gifford told her to call his lawyer, leaving Marilyn heartbroken and feeling abandoned. Determined to prove her worth, Marilyn threw herself into her work. In 1952, she appeared in 5 films, including Monkey Business and Clash by Night. Her acting coach, Natasha Lytess, was constantly by her side, supervising every aspect of her work, much to the annoyance of directors. Despite her growing fame, studio head Darryl Zanuck still saw Marilyn as a dumb blonde. He cast her in roles that reflected this stereotype, and the public ate it up. But Marilyn longed for more complex and challenging roles, not just the sexy, ditzy bombshell. She felt trapped in an image she didn't fully identify with. In 1953, Marilyn was cast as the lead in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, a role that would cement her status as a sex symbol. But even with her own dressing room, a symbol of her rising status, she was plagued by self-doubt and anxiety. She would spend hours on hair and makeup, afraid of making a mistake or disappointing her fans. The studio wasn't thrilled with Marilyn's voice, considering it too breathy and high-pitched. They even wanted to dub her lines, but eventually backed down. However, 2 small parts of her iconic song, "Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend," were still dubbed by another singer. Marilyn's tardiness continued on the set of How to Marry a Millionaire. She was always late, always striving for perfection. But once the cameras rolled, her magic took over, and both films became major hits. Marilyn's personal life was just as dramatic. She married baseball star Joe DiMaggio in 1954, but their marriage was short-lived. DiMaggio wanted a traditional wife, while Marilyn yearned for freedom and independence. The iconic subway grate scene in The 7-Year Itch became a symbol of their clashing values, with DiMaggio furious at the attention Marilyn received from the crowd. Their marriage ended in divorce just 9 months later. Despite the success of Some Like It Hot, Marilyn's life was far from perfect. Her marriage to Arthur Miller was crumbling, and her mental health was deteriorating. She struggled with insomnia and relied on sleeping pills to escape her reality. In 1958, she suffered another devastating miscarriage, blaming herself for the loss due to her dependence on pills and alcohol. After the miscarriage, Marilyn took a break from acting, focusing on her family and therapy with psychiatrist Ralph Greenson. Greenson became a father figure to Marilyn, but their relationship was controversial, with some criticizing him for blurring the lines between therapist and patient. He even gave Marilyn a room in his house, further deepening their bond. When Marilyn's mental health took a dark turn, another psychiatrist recommended she be hospitalized. But instead of a comforting environment, she was sent to the Payne Whitney Psychiatric Clinic, a place known for its harsh conditions and violent patients. Marilyn was terrified and felt like a prisoner. She wrote a desperate letter to Greenson, describing the bars on the windows and the disturbing marks on the walls left by previous patients. To cope with the trauma, Marilyn drew on her acting experience, pretending to be the crazy character from her movie Don't Bother to Knock. She even threatened to hurt herself with a shard of glass, a desperate act to gain her freedom. Eventually, she was moved to a more comfortable room, and she reached out to friends for help. The person who came to her rescue was her ex-husband, Joe DiMaggio. Despite their differences and past struggles, he stepped in to save her from the harrowing experience. It was a surprising turn of events, showing that even after their tumultuous relationship, DiMaggio still cared for Marilyn. In 1953, Marilyn's career hit a high note when she landed her first leading role in the musical Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. The studio finally gave her a dressing room, signaling her growing importance. But despite the success, Marilyn was still plagued by insecurity and fear of failure. She often arrived early to set and stayed late, making everyone wait. Only her co-star Jane Russell could coax her out of her trailer at times. There was tension between the two actresses when Marilyn learned that Russell was earning a much higher salary for the film. Marilyn joked that she deserved more since it was called Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, but the studio refused to renegotiate her contract. Marilyn was also very critical of her own performance, constantly asking for retakes. The studio even disliked her voice, considering dubbing her lines. Thankfully, they decided against it, and only a few parts of her iconic song, Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend, were dubbed by another singer. Despite the challenges, both Gentlemen Prefer Blondes and How to Marry a Millionaire were box office hits, solidifying Marilyn's status as a superstar. But her personal life was far from perfect. Her marriage to Joe DiMaggio was falling apart, and she was struggling with the pressures of fame and the expectations placed upon her. During her separation from DiMaggio, Marilyn began a relationship with playwright Arthur Miller, a man she deeply admired and respected. He saw her as more than just a sex symbol, and she was drawn to his intellect and sensitivity. But their relationship was also troubled, with the FBI investigating Miller for possible communist ties and the studio pressuring Marilyn to end the relationship. Despite the obstacles, they married in 1956, but their happiness was short-lived. Marilyn found Miller's notes criticizing her, which deeply hurt her. The constant scrutiny and pressure of their public lives took a toll on their relationship, and Marilyn's mental health suffered. She battled depression, insomnia, and relied on pills to cope. In 1958, she had another miscarriage, blaming herself for the loss due to her substance abuse. Her marriage to Miller was on the rocks, and her career was floundering. But Marilyn was determined to keep going, clinging to the hope that things would get better. In 1960, she starred in Let's Make Love, a musical comedy where she had an affair with her co-star Yves Montand, right in front of their spouses. The affair didn't last, and as her marriage to Miller crumbled, they began working on their final film together, The Misfits. But the film was a disaster, with constant script changes and tensions on set. Marilyn was unhappy with her role, feeling like Miller had portrayed her in a negative light. By the time filming ended, Marilyn was physically and emotionally exhausted. She had another breakdown and was hospitalized, her life spiraling out of control. Despite her struggles, Marilyn continued to push forward, hoping for a fresh start. In 1962, she bought her first home in California and appeared on the cover of Life magazine. She was offered a role in the film Something's Got to Give, which she hoped would revitalize her career. But her health problems worsened, and she missed several days of filming due to sinusitis. The final chapter of Marilyn Monroe's story is a tragic one. In 1962, she was found dead in her Brentwood home from an overdose of barbiturates. The official cause of death was ruled a suicide, but many questions and conspiracy theories still surround her death. Some believe she was murdered, possibly by the Kennedy brothers, due to her alleged affairs with them. But the truth remains elusive, and Marilyn's untimely demise remains a mystery. Her funeral, a small and private affair organized by her ex-husband Joe DiMaggio, was attended only by close family. However, hundreds of fans gathered outside the cemetery to pay their respects and say goodbye to their beloved icon. For the next 20 years, DiMaggio would send red roses to her grave 3 times a week, a silent testament to his enduring love for her. Marilyn's death at the young age of 36 shocked the world. Her legacy as a sex symbol and a talented actress has only grown stronger with time. She remains a cultural icon, her image gracing countless posters, advertisements, and works of art. But what is the secret to Marilyn's enduring popularity? Perhaps it's because she died at the peak of her beauty and fame, forever frozen in time as a symbol of Hollywood's golden age. We never saw her grow old or lose her allure. Her image remains a timeless reminder of a bygone era, a time of glamour, mystery, and endless possibilities. Marilyn's life was a complex tapestry of beauty, talent, and vulnerability. She longed for love and acceptance, but often found herself used and manipulated by those around her. Despite the challenges and heartbreaks, she persevered, leaving behind a legacy that continues to inspire and captivate audiences around the world. She may not have found the love she craved in her personal life, but she ultimately achieved the love and admiration of millions of fans who will forever remember her as the one and only Marilyn Monroe.